Welcome to the next episode of the Suzuki Gixxer SF project, and in this one I'm going to talk about a particular part on your motorcycle that most of the people don't pay attention to. The fuel tank. This is a vital component that helps in the smooth operation of your machine, and I'm going to show you how to take care of it. Whether you drive a 100cc Hero Splendor or all the way up to a 1200cc BMW adventure bike, these procedures are the same, so watch till the end. The only thing that stops people from working on their machines is fear. What if something goes wrong? What if I mess up something? Relax. That's why I'm making these videos. It's important to have this knowledge in the best interests of your machine so that while you ride, if something happens on the road, you will have this confidence of how to handle it rather than blindly depending on an authorized service center or a third party mechanic. We have seen the recent cases of how customers are complaining because of the bad service they are getting from these centers. So this video is going to be the guidebook on showing how to maintain the fuel tank of your motorcycle, and I'm going to show you the areas that you need to check, clean, maintain or replace if necessary. So this video is going to be very helpful to all of those who want to maintain their machines in good condition for a longer period of time. Step number 1. Check the exterior of the fuel tank thoroughly all the way around, especially in the areas where there are weldings and braces that support the structural integrity of the fuel tank. This is a brace that supports the fuel tank, which then gets mounted onto the frame of the motorcycle. And if this brace is rusting or deteriorating, which would compromise the structural integrity of the fuel tank, and that's not good for your machine. So check for these parts and areas where there are weldings on the machine all the way around. Look for signs of cracks or damages, and if nothing is serious, clean it thoroughly. If necessary, repaint it so that the fuel tank stays in good condition for the coming future. Step number 2. Check the water drain hole that is beside the fuel tank cap in this housing. Let me show it to you closely. If you can see a hole right there, right beside the fuel tank cap, that's the water drain hole, which serves the purpose of draining the rainwater that gets collected onto this housing and then releasing it from the other end. If you see the drain hole being clogged or blocked, take a thin piece of wire or cable, insert it from one end to the other end and clean it thoroughly. A blocked water drain hole would result in the collection of rainwater on top of the fuel tank and eventually seep into the fuel tank, resulting the damage of your fuel system in the opposite end and then eventually your engine, which would cost you a lot of money to repair it. So check and inspect it regularly, especially during rainy seasons. So the position of this water drain hole might differ depending on the model of your motorcycle. Some will have it on the right side, some on the left, top or bottom, but the water drain hole will be placed around this housing. It doesn't matter if you ride a 100cc motorcycle or all the way up to a 1000cc or 1200cc adventure motorcycles. This is part of the new technology that all the motorcycles are coming up with. Step number 3. Check the fuel gauge or the fuel sensor which is inside the fuel tank. This is the coupler that gets mounted to the ECM of your motorcycle, which is responsible for indicating the level of fuel on the instrument cluster of your motorcycle. I've seen many motorcycles, the likes of these modern Royal Enfields, indicating the wrong fuel levels where there is fuel in the tank but the indicator shows empty, and vice versa, leaving most of the riders stranded on the road because they are now having an empty fuel tank. So check and inspect and clean it every time you service your fuel tank. Step number 4. Check and inspect the fuel cork assembly and the fuel filter which gets mounted onto the bottom of the fuel tank. This is the part where you turn the valve to on, off and a reserved mode for your fuel. Inspect the filter because this is responsible for filtering all the impurities and foreign particles that gets collected onto the bottom of the fuel tank. So if you have a clogged filter, You may result in having the problems like low fuel mileage or misfiring on your motorcycle, so on and so forth. So clean this part every time you service your fuel tank. Step number 5. Check all the fuel hoses and the rubber lines that goes from the fuel tank to the fuel system of your machine, whether you have a carbureted version or a fuel injection version. As the rubber deteriorates over time, so replace them if they are cracked or busted. These fuel lines are very cheap and economical, so don't take a chance over them and get yourself stranded out there in the middle of the road. So make sure to inspect them and replace them over a period of time. Step number 6. Check and inspect your fuel tank cap and the weatherproofing rubber seal that is beneath it, which is responsible for keeping the fuel tank airtight and not letting the foreign particles like the rainwater seeping into the fuel tank. This small part is very rarely cleaned or maintained by most of the riders, yet you use it every time you need fuel. So check for the smooth operation of the key and see whether the spring is properly functioning. If necessary, use a bit of WD-40 or small amounts of grease to maintain this part in a very good condition. So the time intervals when it comes to how often you have to do these checks on your motorcycles is entirely dependent on your riding style and the environmental conditions. Let's say if you are somebody who does the off-roading or ride in extreme weather conditions, then you have to perform these checks for every 5,000 kilometers. And if you are a city rider, then you have to do it for every 20,000 kilometers. I know it's hard work, but you can't really put a price on your motorcycle as your personal emotions and attachments are involved with it. This Suzuki Gixxer SF 150 is a 7-year-old motorcycle that I recently purchased, and this fuel tank is in absolute perfect condition except a bit of paint peeling off, which is expected after 7 years. And upon closer inspection, by the looks of it, this tank was never opened or serviced in all these 7 years. And that's why it's always a best practice to check every single part when you're working on a project like this. So I'm gonna repaint the areas where the paint has slightly peeled off and bring it back to such a condition that is far more better than a factory finish. And that's going to be the next episode. So stay tuned, engage with the content, learn from it, and start working on your own machine. I'll see you in the next one soon. Peace.